Welcome to Los Angeles, rookie.
The City of Angels. No angels here anymore, unless you count Angel Mendoza.
Target moving south on Harbor.
Angel runs a tattoo salon in Hollywood. He's a recon mutant with 6 hands. Angel gave me this.
X1 Alpha, you got yourself a
Code 7.
This is the LAPD. Horror!
The year is 2098. Los Angeles has fallen into the crime wars, and you are going to sort it out. Piloting the advanced X1 Alpha police vehicle, you'll switch between walking mech mode and hovercraft mode while stomping around 8 different levels and using 14 different weapons to take down everything from gang members to robot slugs, an insane underground clown cult to a rogue supercomputer. Future Cop LAPD is a beloved cult classic, but never quite got the mainstream appeal needed to become a franchise. But why? So I've gone back to replay every level and critique every mechanic, and to answer the simple question, Future Cop LAPD, was it actually any good? And after answering a simple question, we'll ask a more complex question. Did Future Cop, with its Precinct Assault 2-player mode, actually create the MOBA genre itself, predating the infamous Warcraft 3 Dota mods by 5 whole years and releasing before the StarCraft Aeons of Strife 3-lane map? Do games like League of Legends, Dota 2, Heroes of the Storm, Smite, and many more owe their very existence to this forgotten sci-fi shooter? Let's find out. As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon, Twitch, and YouTube who keep the channel alive. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. 1998 was a great year for video games. Ocarina of Time, Half-Life, Metal Gear Solid, and many more. The year was full of classics. It was also the year Electronic Arts, a company who had produced hundreds of video games for Windows, MS-DOS, and the 4th and 5th generation of consoles, moved their studio from San Mateo to Redwood Shores. And in the move, they created a new team, EA Redwood Shores, and that team's first game, Future Cop LAPD. The Redwood Shores team would go on to create a string of movie tie-in games until they eventually rebranded as Visceral Entertainment and struck video game gold with the sci-fi horror series Dead Space. Now everyone knows Dead Space, but how did Redwood Shores do on their very first game? Future Cop LAPD was a top-down third-person action shooter releasing on PlayStation 1 in September of 1998 and then 2 months later releasing on Windows and Mac. While the original version on PC is now considered abandonware and is available for download on myabandonware.com, getting the old software to run on a modern hardware is a bit of a pain, so the footage in this video is from the PlayStation 1 version. Both versions are functionally identical. While playing the game and researching the history, I also discovered a project on Steam called LAPD 2195, touting itself as a modern reimagining of Future Cop, but they're very sparse on the details with no gameplay, and honestly I don't even know if they've got the rights to do this. Now according to Wikipedia, Future Cop only sold about 200,000 units, which means more people will likely watch this video than bought this game. Despite poor sales numbers, many people remember the game fondly, likely because it featured as a playable demo on PlayStation Demo Disc number 39. This demo disc released in December of 1998, meaning it was essentially the Christmas demo pushing for Christmas sales. And unfortunately for Future Cop, it was the same demo which also featured the first playable level of Tomb Raider 3 and a section of Spyro the Dragon, both of which dominated the PlayStation 1 Christmas sales charts and left Future Cop in the dust. So let's load it up and enjoy the B-movie cyberpunk CGI intro.
Nice work, rookie. Now where was I? Oh yeah, Big LA. Mutants, gangsters, chem lords, whacked out cyborgs, high-tech, this and that. We got it. Remember, kid, serve, protect, survive.
X1 Alpha, 2 lane in progress. 14 officers down, need assistance. Code 77.
This is the LAPD. Put down your... Thank you for your support.
Very cheesy, very cyberpunk, very self-aware, and I am on board so far. Okay, the main menu, and the first thing you see is not only does Future Cop look lovely with these visual flourishes around the main menu, but it sounds fantastic. Scored by David O'Neill, known for his previous work on the third-person Soviet Strike and Nuclear Strike games, Future Cop is undeniably his best work. Deep bass with catchy riffs, electro synths and alarms layered with distant city sounds, gunshots and explosions, police radio chatter overlaid and giving just enough flavor but never taking attention away. It is a masterful mix of action soundtrack, ambient cityscape, and rhythmic sci-fi, which blends together so well that playing this game is an audio dream. And to top it all off, the composition of each track matches the themes of the level it's meant for. When you're assaulting a city garden, it's open, airy, and the voices drift off on the breeze. When you're underground, it resonates and echoes with the splashing of the sewers and clanging of the pipes. And when you're taking down a slug-worshipping cult, it's squishy and slimy with pops and swirls of bubbles of gooey electro. Every second of Future Cop sounds perfect. And this is before we get to the voice acting, which itself is great. So let's play. You've got the Crime War story mode or the Precinct Assault MOBA style game, and each of these modes is either single or two-player, meaning yes, you can play the entire main campaign through with a friend in split screen. And if you do this, you share a health bar. So if one of you dies, you both die, making this one of the more challenging two-player games of the late 90s. Let's start the Crime War campaign, and we are given a full info dump tutorial.
This is X1 Alpha, LAPD's best weapon in the war against crime. The crime lord's edge and firepower is over. Now you've got the weapons to serve, protect, and survive. X1 Alpha can go almost anywhere. When precise movement is required, use the action button. When you're under fire, your best friend is the Jink. Give the bad guys a moving target. If you've really got a motor, press the change target and action buttons at the same time. Voila! When to do it is up to you. Your HUD shows the usual stuff: armor status, weapons load, and ammo count. On the radar, follow the green arrow toward the green diamond. That's your target. Get rid of one target and a new one will take its place. Listen, green dots identify switches and elevators. You'll need the action button to use them. Red dots? They're the bad guys.
Now, regular viewers will know that I'm not a fan of info dump video tutorials because it asks the player to memorize a huge amount of information quickly and then apply it all at once instead of allowing them to experience it slowly and build up knowledge through repetition. Playable hidden tutorials within games are way better. So we add a pilot name, choose a difficulty, and select a zone. These are your levels. They unlock in a set order and you'll play through 8 of them. First up is Griffith Park.
X1 Alpha, Code 3. Proceed to the observatory. Officers are down. Hostile air and armor units confirmed. Be advised. Civilians are caught in the crossfire and the situation is rated X. That's why we need you, darling. Your target is one Miles Mysterio. He's converted the park telescope into a plasma cannon. Gets his kicks bringing down commercial aircraft. Bag 2 this morning. The department wants this assassin taken out. That's a code 7X, no assistance needed. He's all yours.
So your standard observatory hijacking. Before we charge into battle, we get to set up our mech, and you've got 3 weapon slots: the main auto gun, the heavy weapon, and then the special weapon. Each slot has 4 total options, but you unlock more as you complete levels. There are also 3 hidden weapons throughout the game, but we'll find those as we go. So for now, we're using the minigun, basic missiles, and a basic mortar. Level starts and you're thrown straight into the action, with enemies shooting you already and the radio barking demands in your ear. I hope you were paying attention to the tutorial video, so let's break down the gameplay. Top-down camera. Forward and backward on the D-pad moves you, left and right turn you. L2 and R2 strafe left and right. There's no stick controls here. Triangle is jump, although it's somewhat awkward. If you jump while moving forward, you'll jump smoothly forward, and if you jump while standing still, you'll do this kind of strange bunny hop and move very slightly forward. Future Cop does rely quite a bit on platforming in the later levels, and jumping is definitely one of the weakest aspects of control. Pressing select changes the camera, and you can cycle through normal mode, which tracks behind your mech, normal close-up mode, sky, which is zoomed out and my personal favorite, or this strange sideways locked aspect, which is awful. Why would you ever lock the camera like this in a 3D game? If you played Future Cop like this, why? The HUD is a basic radar with shapes: red for enemies, green for objectives, yellow for ammo reloaders. Every level in Future Cop has several preset objectives, and they're always linear and always flow nicely. The levels are intuitively designed to guide you from set piece to set piece, all except that one water level, but we'll get to that later. If you do get lost, pausing the game brings up a level map, and you can scroll around and see objectives, enemies, and your current location. Now, there's no objective list or tracker. You'll just get radio updates on what you're meant to do. Your health is shown by this little meter next to a shield icon, and then you've got your ammo counts for the 3 weapons. And here is something I really like, and I don't even know if this was intentional, but it's an extremely intuitive bit of design. Your weapons are shown in order: gun, heavy, special. And on the PlayStation controller, gun is square, heavy is cross, and special is circle, which matches up the linear order of the ammo counts on the screen with the line of buttons on the controller. And if that was intentional, this is great design. So let's shoot some stuff. When you're facing an enemy, you'll always lock on, shown by the red laser target locking on. As long as you keep turning to face the enemy, you'll stay locked on and all of your shots will track toward your locked target. Not all of your weapons track in the air though, so sometimes you'll fire at an enemy and they'll move out the way and you'll hit where they were, not where they're going to be. You can still fire when not locked onto anything as well, useful for firing mortars over scenery and blowing up stuff on the other side. Sometimes you'll find yourself in a crowd control situation. The camera will zoom in and a little crowd control label will pop up. These bits are mostly just to show off the enemy animations and get you up close and personal to the violence, and my god is there a lot of violence. Enemy vehicles are animated smoothly, but infantry tend to be every other frame's static sprites, giving them this choppy movement effect. This was done so they can flood the screen with way more enemies and not affect performance, and it works because when the enemies die, they explode into a satisfying spray of blood and guts with this little scream. Along with enemies blowing up, everything else blows up too. Scenery, objects, trees, doors, hell, there's even a level of you blowing up a building just to advance further into it. And when things do blow up, you'll see a shower of polygons spin through the air and rain down, the screen shakes, the sound effects reverb, the bright colors, the red flames, and often green energy all mixed together, which makes shooting things in Future Cop just quite simply fun. Visual design, audio design, combat mechanics, and meta screen shake are all adding together and becoming greater than the sum of their parts. Playing Future Cop is, at its core, just a viscerally satisfying experience. After a few minutes of stomping around and blowing things up, you very quickly learn that different guns should be used for different things. Your machine gun is great at mowing down infantry, but doesn't do too much damage to structures and gets blocked by small terrain features. Your heavy weapons like missiles demolish buildings and blow up scenery, but can't be fired in quick succession, and your special weapon, in this case the mortar, flies up into the air, avoiding almost all obstructions, and comes crashing down for massive damage, but it does travel slowly, so it's only really usable against stationary targets like gun emplacements. Or you can use it defensively by dropping a mortar onto these mines and clearing the way, and I love when mechanics affect multiple things. It's not just a damage button, it's a utility button. Now thankfully, you can fire all three guns at the same time, meaning you can spray out some serious firepower, and you'll need to against the endless hordes of bad guys, but eventually you will run out of ammo, and that's where you'll need a refill station. Each station can only be used once and gives a single type of ammo, or a shield for a max HP refill. You just run up to them and press L1. Now some refill stations don't restock, but they enhance, and if you find a power-up station, your radio will let you know.
That's a heavy weapon power-up.
Weapon power-ups add a limited amount of super-powered ammunition for that specific gun. Machine guns fire faster, missiles track, mortars split into cluster bombs. Every weapon has an enhanced version. So when you find an upgrade, your radio lets you know. This means we should talk about the voice talent, starting with the radio lady, because she is a fantastic side character, full of personality and yet totally believable in her role as your handler. Voiced by Shannon Finn, an actress who went on to see a selection of minor roles, her sassy personality here really adds a touch of grounded but still cheeky realism. She's got that 9-to-5 day job, clock in, clock out boredom infused with the gotta find fun where you work attitude of blowing stuff up in a giant mech. She'll brief you on missions and offer updated objectives as you play, and you can tell that she just loves her job.
Ruthie, the exit is clear. Move out. X1 Alpha, could you spare a minute to free some hostages? The House of Big Victor Tuna. Let's bust it up.
The only other two voice actors listed are Roger Jackson and Jarian Monroe. Now, Roger has an extensive list of credits, from voicing Mojo Jojo in the Powerpuff Girls to Harkin in Mass Effect 1 and 2, but he's probably best known for supplying the voice of Ghostface in the Scream franchise. Jarian has also made a decent career out of voice acting with hundreds of smaller roles. He's even Dr. Kaufman in the original Silent Hill, another game I've replayed previously on this channel, and he's Joe Chill in the Batman Telltale games. Now, in a strange coincidence, both Roger and Jarian have worked together before on the dubbing of the PlayStation 1 game Fade to Black, and then the PlayStation 2 launch title X Squad, both games I will replay for this channel in the future. As for the moment-to-moment gameplay itself, the environments are large enough to be worth exploring, but densely packed enough with enough enemies and destructible scenery that there's never too much downtime between the action. You've also got various levels of floor with jumping sections and straight lines to turrets or flying enemies blocked by buildings, meaning you're encouraged to keep finding new vantage points. And most enemy projectiles can be avoided by moving or dodging behind buildings, so you're always encouraged to be moving. Graphically, you've got the muted, dull tones of the brick and the floor splashed with brightly coloured anti-police graffiti or beautiful explosions or energy weapon glows, meaning you've got a well-handling mech placed in a good-looking and good-sounding environment. But, and this is one of the coolest parts, you're not just a mech. If you press L1 and R1 together, your X1 Alpha unit switches from walker mode into hover tank mode. Both modes keep the same weapon loadout, but movement becomes something else entirely. The walking mech is slow but steady. It can jump and it can climb slopes, but it can also step on mines. The hover tank is much faster, turns quicker, and can drift around corners, but it cannot handle ramps. Now, changing movement mode isn't just a mechanical preference. They've actually managed to use both movement modes with mechanics in later levels. For now, I'll stick with the mech. Here's a lovely touch halfway through the first mission. I'm told there are some hostages trapped nearby, so I take a quick diversion from my main objective and go and free them. You'll flip some switches to do this and shoot some enemies, and then the hostages are free. Now that could simply be the end of it, but they've actually animated in an LAPD NPC hovercar driving through the whole level and picking the hostages up and then driving them off to safety, accompanied by backup. Now this is such a small part of the level which you can barrel past and never see. You can complete the objective and run away before you ever see this animation. But the little narrative through line of this side quest actually being finished really fleshes out the world and gives your actions more weight. The rescue didn't stop with you. You're involved, but you're just a part of this much larger team. This is the kind of detail I'd expect to see from an RPG, not a level-based action shooter. Halfway in, we find the first mini-boss. We check this garage door, and when you head back, a flying disc armed to the teeth begins to attack you. Now, thankfully, you're in an open area, so it's just dodge and keep shooting. Now, none of the mini-boss fights are too drawn out. They're perfectly paced to stay just on the fun side of tedious. And after taking enough damage, here's another touch I love. The saucer itself crashes into the closed door and blows open the way to the rest of the level. The reason I think this is great is because mechanically you could have just defeated the saucer, watched it fly off and had the door unlock, but no, they wanted the fight itself to feel not only mechanically relevant, but then narratively relevant because the fight directly causes the crash which opens the way. It's a lovely simple flow of events which all stack, and they connect the end of one section to the start of the next, and this helps the transition feel natural. It feels less video game and more movie. And Future Cop does this a lot. I'm also noticing that enemies lead their shots based on your last known movement, so you've got to constantly adapt to avoid running or strafing into a hail of enemy ammunition. This is a lift. L1 activates it. Getting up to different levels is either a case of jump from some very odd angles or just find the lift. And as I find out soon, there is fall damage. Actually, quite a lot of fall damage, so taking a lift down is always the best choice. The laser gate is also controlled by a switch. L1 turns it off. Red switch for the red gate, and this leads to a small maze and a platforming section to get to the blue switch for the blue gate, and hey look, a mortar power-up basically turns you into the multiple Fat Man launcher from Fallout. I jump down from a ledge a little bit too high and I die. Now when you die, you are exploded out of the X1 Alpha, showing the pilot hasn't died but your vehicle has, and then you restart the level. Now Future Cop does not have checkpoints within the levels. This means that you must restart from the start entirely. Now when you know what you're doing, each level is relatively short, and speedrunning them, even without glitches, only takes a few minutes, so death isn't too frustrating, apart from dying on the stupid underground mutant clown level, but we'll get to that later. Running back after dying means you'll often take on more enemies faster because you've got more confidence, you know the level and you know the route and you know what to expect. And Future Cop really begins to excel in creating this feeling of charging into overwhelming odds while still letting you feel just in control enough to succeed. Bullets are flying, music's pounding, radio's screaming, you are surrounded and you are outmanned, but you are never ever outgunned. And in a lovely touch, as you close in on the bad guy of any mission, they'll hijack your radio and start to taunt you.
Green gate down, total security failure.
That's it. The last fence is down.
I can't wait to meet you in person.
I like this, it makes the final confrontation with any boss that much more personal. The observation laser hijack ends in this set fight. Ramps to run up, walls to hide behind, flying enemies to distract your targeting lock on, shields to weaken and smaller laser turrets to take out, before you have to just throw all your firepower at this massive huge static boss and then the whole thing explodes into a lovely shower of debris. And after each level you get a cutscene, and I love how the first one subverts my expectations of this level's bad guy.
Pure Central, but no sign of Mysterio.
Copy 1, Adam 5. No sign of Mysterio.
So the observatory blows up, but then you realize the bad guy isn't there and they start to escape in a ship, and I expected this to start an epic chase, maybe lead to a longer plot, but no. You just shoot the ship down, no problem, on to the next case, and this is a story beat I really respect about Future Cop. Every level ends with a very "we're done" moment. Each level is independent because they're just crime scenes that you're responding to and sorting out. There's no greater narrative, there's no conspiracy of bad guys, no betrayal within your own team, because honestly it doesn't need it. Future Cop is an action game. It gives you just enough narrative to reasonably require a giant police mech to get involved, and then just lets you go and blow stuff up. For example, Mission 2, we've now unlocked the flamethrower and the heavy concussion beam, and we're being sent to Zuma Beach to deal with a giant drug production facility.
X1 Alpha, this is Central. We have a Code 2 in Zuma Beach. The perp is Xerxes Zeno. You know, the king of designer drugs. His new batch of Extreme Z is killer, literally. No customer complaints. They're all dead. Your target is the Extreme Z Automated Processing Station. Zeno's pride and joy. You are cleared to use all necessary force. Code 7X.
The flamethrower is closer range but does increased damage, and the concussion beam has no travel time like missiles and shoots through enemies, hitting everything in a straight line. Mission objective: there is a drug-making facility. Go and make there not be a drug-making facility. This does mean some platforming. Now the hover tank mode can't jump, so you need to go mech mode, destroy a power source to open a gate, and then a lovely design touch. You can see a power-up on the walkway above, and it jumps to the foreground when you walk under it. Future Cop uses the vertical space in levels very well, because the combat covers all the levels at all the times. You can shoot up and down, but exploration requires a specific route to get to a higher level. So you're solving the puzzle of navigating the level to reach the thing you saw 5 minutes ago, while also unloading endless firepower at all times against all levels. Eventually we fall into this purple gravity bowl, and it's a trap. Going in spawns enemies and these damaging plasma balls, and the walker cannot move fast enough here to avoid the damage. So the hover tank mode saves you as you can zip about faster. You need to use the ramps to build up speed to destroy the 4 corner generators to break the gravity effect. And then we need to find 4 switches to open a gate, but note how you are hemmed into a tight corridor section filled with enemy infantry. Well, you've unlocked the flamethrower, which means you've likely equipped it and you're now given the perfect environment to use it in. Close quarters, infantry heavy. I really like how each new weapon unlock is immediately given its exact environmental chance to shine. This is also the first time that I've run out of ammo, and I realize while you can constantly spam concussion beams, you probably shouldn't, because now taking out the aircraft is way harder. Another mini-boss, but I'm superpowered, so it dies almost instantly, and just like the first, explodes, blows a hole in the grated floor, and opens a new path forward. I cannot overstate how much I enjoy the interaction between combat mechanics, set boss battles, and environmental navigation. Reach the drug facility. It is a 3-section tower. Blow up the bottom and the middle, no problem, but then the top starts flying around and shooting back, so we run up some ramps and hide behind some railings until we bring it down in a blaze of glory.
Congratulations! I don't think anyone will miss his house calls.
X1 Alpha, hit the tar pits, baby. Mayor Bavacqua's daughter Carmen, starlet wannabe, was kidnapped leaving the Brown Turtle nightclub early this morning. She was taken by that cult of worm mutant freak of whatever worshippers down on Wilshire. The cult's high priestess, expeditress Tiffany Klein, has her scheduled for a sunrise sacrifice to their idol. The pulpit is deep in the tar pits. Find it, rescue the babe, and send her holiness to hell.
The third level is probably my favourite narrative-wise because of how absurd it is. The mayor's daughter, a budding young film actress, has been kidnapped by a cult of giant mecha slug-worshipping psychos, and we need to break into their labyrinth and free her. I mean, that plot could be a whole novel, a whole game. That's a whole season's worth of decent TV right there, but it's just a day's work for a future cop. The mission gets us the bounce mine special weapon, which honestly suck. There's never a time you'll be thinking, oh, thank God I brought the bounce mines with me. The Aqueduct is a great little shooting gallery. Enemies are placed in such a way that you can hold down fire, run through, and just kill everything in this constant wave of explosions. And the giant slugs with mounted guns on them are one of the most sci-fi enemy designs. I love sci-fi when technology takes on biology, like the underground nest level in Armored Core or the entirety of Starship Troopers. And now a lovely combination of mechanics. You need to activate this PowerPoint by switching to the hover tank mode and flying at speed through some gates in the Aqueduct. This activates the pumping machinery, so you switch to Walker and jump up the now moving pistons to scale the sewers. Lovely through line of combined mechanics. This underground tunnel with squares on the walls takes us to a switch which opens a gate, but also activates those previous squares which now become crushers that we need to avoid when heading back. There and back again level design is fine, and having the back again bit be more challenging is a great bit of difficulty progression, especially when the threat is visible but inert the first time you pass through. Our radio then lets us know the slug cult are not messing around.
Well, a river of blood. There's something you don't see every day.
The River of Blood is a hazardous area. You'll take damage over it even when you're in hovercar mode, but you can cross it quite quickly. 3 switches drop the shield to a main switch, which activates a lift and gets us onto a runway, and now another great use of the differences in movement between Walker and Hover. To access the labyrinth, you'll need to switch to Hover and then drive at speed toward the end ramp and use your momentum to fly over the gap because it's too far to jump. But once you're in the labyrinth, you need to switch back to the Walker to navigate jumping up the crumbled walls. This is a lovely clash of fantasy and sci-fi, fighting through a broken medieval maze. The main issue here is this is a long maze, and it loops back on itself several times, and each loop gets you onto a higher ledge, and if you fall down, you'll be right back at the start because there are no shortcuts. While running the walls, I noticed a brilliant bit of sound design that fits so well I didn't even notice it was happening at first. Moving the mech forward and backward has one engine sound. Turning side to side has another because it would likely be using different motors. And strafing has another again, and this all makes sense because these 3 movements would be handled by different hydraulics. It's small touches like this which make piloting the mech feel weighty. If everything sounded the same, the vehicle would just feel one-dimensional, but this way it feels really imposing within the world. Finally, we reach the boss, a sacrifice pit with tentacles lashing out of it and the mayor's daughter chained against the side, the cult's evil leader pacing back and forth along a temple overlook. Obstructions block our sightlines, so you have to risk dodging toward the tentacles, and rocks are falling, meaning you're ducking into cover of the overhanging temple, and ads are spawning, so your targeting array is being disrupted. And you need to stay on top of all of this, all while the daughter yells for help. All in all, this is a super fun fight in a very nicely designed area. Now, every level ends when you defeat the final boss. You don't need to get to an extraction point, just blow up the big thing and you are done. This keeps the level pace nice and fast. If they did end a level with an okay, now escape bit, it wouldn't really suit Future Cop. It's a path of destruction to a climactic battle and then a reset. And from the sewers, we are off to the beach.
Central to X1 Alpha. You know about the turf war in Venice Beach. Well, here's a switch. Big Vic Tatuna wants our help. He's looking for LAPD to referee a powwow with the other clans. The department is sending you in.
So you've been tasked with refereeing a negotiation between rival gangs, but when you arrive, it's a trap and you're ambushed, so you need to escape. And that's when you decide, while you're here, you may as well fight into the gang's compound and take down the leader. As for new tech, we've got hyperspeed rockets and a plasma flare launcher, which is just a better mortar. And there's no way to sugarcoat it, this level is bad. It's probably the weakest level in the game by a country mile because it takes almost everything bad about Future Cop and makes you repeat it about 5 times. Swapping the densely packed action-heavy city streets or infested aqueduct for open waters with rectangle repeating land bars, you need to activate a series of switches, gates, and bridges to open up the final room to the bad guy's lair, but the level is much larger than any other, and the expanses between bits are much greater. You're also switching from hover to walker mode constantly because only the hover car can cross water. The switches are mostly found on the roof of the square land masses, and jumping up them can also take a few tries. I do, however, find one of the hidden weapons, the K9 robot dog missile, will equip this next mission. The beach is the first level where I get completely lost. The map doesn't help here because everything looks the same. It's almost a copy-pasted level. And even though the map does have a green objective marker highlighting the gate that I need to open, it doesn't highlight where the button that opens it is. The pacing of this level just falls way off, and you'll veer from focused into frustrated, but even frustration drops off into boredom. You see, Future Cop really excels at densely packed urban warfare with lots of things blowing up and lots of enemy variety all attacking you at once. It's a short but sweet experience, and this level drags out the exploration and encounters and highlights that just traveling from place to place isn't the game's strong point. Future Cop is a game that is greater than the sum of its parts, and when you add all those parts together at the same time, it's fantastic, but when you break them down and experience them each slowly individually, it's not anywhere near as strong. Thankfully, it still kept the humor and personal touch of the level's bad guys. This looks like a switch, but it's actually a trap to make us kill a guy, and when we do...
Police brutality.
After about half an hour of exploring, I actually end up soft-locking myself here, taking the wrong route, walking along a wall and falling into an earlier area. But I'm unable to open the door from this area for a second time, and I need to restart the entire level. The collision detection on these barges is also awful. You need to cross the water in walker mode by jumping from and to them, but more often than not, you'll just fall straight through onto the water again. Eventually, we make it into Big Vic's casino, the base, complete with flashing card images and gambling iconography. Free some guy from an electrical prison and then fight Big Vic himself. He emerges on this hybrid submarine warship, leading to an open ocean battle. Now, there are still enemies, but the only mechanic here is to wait for him to surface and then shoot a lot. And, you know, removing any of the scenery from a boss fight really makes you appreciate how important the scenery actually is. I'm assuming the focus of this boss was to make you master the movement of the hovercraft with nowhere to hide, but it ends up feeling a little bit simple. I feel this is one of the bosses they didn't realize the full potential of. But after we take Big Vic down, we are off to Hell's Gate Prison.
X1 Alpha, we have a code 7X situation at the Hell's Gate maximum security facility. The prison is under siege by a terrorist group called Apocalypse. They're attempting to free their leader, a psycho named Vehar Telkai, recently transferred from Folsom. Apocalypse has managed to gain complete control of the prison. They don't take prisoners. All security defenses and guard personnel are under attack.
So now we're fighting into a maximum security prison to stop the extraction of a high-value prisoner. We've got the Gatling laser unlocked as well, and the secret Robo-Dog tracking missile from the level before. This level is the exact opposite of the beach. Instead of open spaces, you're completely hemmed in. To even enter the prison, you need to wait for a vehicle to leave and rush through the open gate, and then you're a sitting duck for the waves of enemy artillery above you. The Hell's Gate level doesn't build out like the beach, it builds up instead, with a load of different vantage points all overlooking and overlocking and crisscrossing each other. Progress through this level is essentially following a tightly wound vertical spiral and finding your way to the next layer. And in a nice narrative touch, you even end up fighting an old model of the X1 Alpha suit that you yourself are piloting.
Those are the old LAPD units. Don't get nostalgic on me. Take them out.
Now, I like this level a lot more than the open beach because densely packed battles are what Future Cop does best, but this is possibly too dense. The corridors are very narrow and the navigation is very rigid. And playing through this level, I realized why the first few levels, especially the Precinct Assault mode we'll look at soon, are the best bits. Future Cop excels when you have a choice of how to approach the problem, when you decide if you're hanging back and launching mortars or charging in with a chain gun, stomping up ramps and jumping gaps as the mech or drifting round corners as the hover tank. Future Cop is an amazing experience when you're able to say, okay, this is the problem and this is how I'm going to solve it, because the environment allows for multiple approaches. When the level is forcing a certain playstyle, as fun as that can be in small doses, it loses some of the magic of personal choice in longer sessions. Also, the enemies you're fighting in this level are undeniably Space Marines from Warhammer 40k. I mean, look! They are chunky guys in green armor with shoulder trim. They're even carrying bolter-style guns with backpacks on. They are absolutely Space Marines. You cannot convince me otherwise. And when the good prison guards show up to help you fight against the insurgency, the good guys are blue armored dudes with gold shoulder trim. They're Ultramarines. I mean, yeah, I can agree with this. As a filthy casual Ultramarine player myself, clearly they are the best boys. No questions asked, no notes, perfect level. Navigating the maze reminds me a little bit of trying to climb up rock faces in Tomb Raider, a blocky square grid layout, set jump distance and precise angles needed, and a fall sending you right back to the start. Now here is a lovely touch, again relating to the whole design principle of cool visual becoming involved mechanic. Early in the level, you can see these giant bladed turbines on top of the walls, but you're way below them, so they're just visual at the start. But as you climb up, you're now running along the top of the walls, and the blades you saw earlier are hazards you need to time and run past. This is great looping design. It's a memorable visual becoming a fun hazard. And it's almost a Chekhov's gun style design principle. If you're going to let the player see something interesting and cool early in the level, make sure you have them interact with it later in the level. The boss of this level, however, is frustrating. You reach the top rampart and now need to defend yourself from 3 gunships diving in from overhead doing strafing bombing runs. This means dodging incoming ordnance, and this means you'll accidentally fall off the edge and die a lot. Running the walls and seeing the lower levels is cool, but this boss really tests your spatial awareness. There is no way you can do this as a hover tank either. Thankfully, after taking them all out, you're gifted one of the coolest end-level cinematics.
That's Behar. Stay with him. Don't worry about them. They're all mine. Lights out, suckers.
A cowboy-style pistols at high noon snipe straight down the sight, brilliant. Next up, one of the more eclectic levels, an underground subway leading to a lava-filled military base connected to an abandoned clown-theme amusement park. And it's all one level.
X1 Alpha. Put on your hip boots, Ace. Next stop is the sewers. Your target is a rat named Lorik Hollywood, suspected of releasing toxic bioreactive waste into South Central. The department believes it's only a taste of things to come. Be advised, Lorik is a recon mutant. His motto is better life through chemistry, and his middle name is Death to the Upworlders.
You start in the sewers and need to fight your way through to Happy Land, the crumbling theme park. The special weapon unlocked is the Shockwave Generator, massive damage in a small local area. The difficulty with this level is falling onto the live subway car rails just demolishes your health, and as you need to time some quite tight jumps over gaps, and if you do fall in, timing the jump to get out is difficult. You will die here. A lot. This level is a challenge to navigate fast, but it's a great example of densely packed sightlines, platforming, and hazards all combining together. The sewers themselves are a series of elevated walkways, switches and lifts, and then giant spiders, which thankfully aren't as tough as they look. The funhouse is a bit further in. Apparently it's an old theme park which fell through a giant crack in the ground at the start of the crime wars. You know, while I appreciate the world building that Future Cop LAPD does, it's never really relevant. It never affects gameplay or connects to reoccurring NPCs or any items that you can find in the world. It shows they've definitely thought about the fictional world of Future Cop, but you only ever learn about it in retrospect. Your actions don't affect it moving forward. And then we reach this platforming over mushrooms section and find a lovely bit of cheeky character depth for Radio Lady.
What the hell? I haven't seen mushrooms like that since college.
Eventually we bump into this mini-boss and I discover why all the other bosses are usually kept at a distance. Future Cop suffers the same flaw as Dark Souls. Every enemy is weak to close-range circle strafing. Deeper in, and now we're at the lava river and more world building.
Looks like part of a military installation. Wonderful. Who knows what that psycho has dug up.
So this is a sewer-bound, lava-filled ex-military testing facility connected to the sunken remains of a clown-themed fun park. Did they have plans to make all these levels individual but ran out of time and just crammed them all together? Because I've got to say, it is working. This area also has a new mechanic, teleporters, bright orbs of light which sends you to a new location. Now, when you've used the teleporter, the light glow disappears, but the teleport mechanic is still there. So it looks like a one-time use thing, but it's not. Some swinging gate hazards, more narrow walkway navigation, and goddamn, if you fall in this lava, it is game over because you are not getting out in time. And remember, no checkpoints. Every level must be finished in one go, and this is one of the longest. Eventually, you activate some switches and get sent here. Now, this feels pure video game. A swinging pendulum blocking a jump to a platform with 4 switches, and each needing a smaller ride on a moving platform to get to another switch. This really does start to explore the limits of Future Cop as a platformer, and I'm glad it never gets more complex than this, because the hitboxes on the mech and the pendulum both show it's not tight enough to stand as a pure platformer. Finally, into the clown mutant castle of Funland, this huge grouping of enemies perfectly plays into the shockwave generator we unlocked for this level. And then you've got more movement-based hazards in the castle, dodging the fireballs, flying down these corridors to activate more switches, and then finally a huge boss wading through some toxic green slime. While shooting him, you can also shoot some missile structures into the pit and then throw all the ammo you've got at this guy. And in a nice tactical touch, the shockwave generator, the weapon you unlocked for this level, may help for the rest of this level, but it does not help for the boss as he's too far away. So if you die here, you're left thinking about your own setup. Is restarting the level with an early game advantage worth losing the boss advantage? But after an unrelenting battle, Toxic Dude down, we are off to the spaceport.
X1 Alpha, this is Central. Code 7X on a high-profile 1099 in progress. Megalito Amora Manos, that diminutive maniac, has taken control of the LAX spaceport. LAPD SWAT was unsuccessful. Their condition is unknown. Megalito and company are holed up in the Space Tower restaurant. Take back the spaceport, rescue any hostages. Bring in Amora Manos, dead or alive. Over and out.
New weapon, fusion torpedoes, mini-missiles which shred through enemy armor. The spaceport itself is a fortress-style level, opening gates and corridors with enemies above them, creating danger zones for you to run through. Enemy air support swooping in for strafing and bombing runs, and in a great touch, your own backup charging in with you, actually holding their own. The spaceport has been taken over, so we're taking it back, and this is a lovely level, much more open than the sewers with no environmental hazards, but far more enemies, meaning every inch of this place is a firefight. And now one of my favorite bits. You need to access the control tower, but it's behind this building. So the destructible scenery team decided to show what they could do. You blow up the entire building, and as you do, crumbled support struts form the walkway that you will now jump from to access the next bit. It's a beautiful moment, and only slightly ruined by me failing this final jump like 5 times. Charge into the runway of the spaceport to defend the area, and honestly, this whole section is just fun. It's like they found the perfect balance of scenery and enemy, challenging heavy support and cathartic sacrificial bullet sponges. This is a great bit. In fact, it's so great I actually ran out of ammo from shooting too much and need to spend a while hunting a restock station while dodging incoming shots. Unfortunately, the pace slows greatly toward the end of this section. Remember the teleporters in the sewers? They were a new mechanic, but they were visually obvious and the radio explained them so you knew what to do with them. But here, you're told to activate the runway, so you flip a switch, and now you're told it's active, and then nothing. You don't know what to do with that. I fly around for a while trying to figure out what I've now unlocked. I even switched to the hovercar mode and try and make the ramp jump like the Aqueduct level, but no luck. Eventually I realize you need to activate the runway, switch to hover, fly to the back of the runway, and then press the action button, the same button that activates lifts, to shoot yourself down. But this isn't made obvious, and there is no terminal, and nowhere does it tell you you can do this. If you were a kid playing this game, I can imagine you really struggling with this. Launching from the runway sends you flying into the harbor, and now you are taking on a battleship. Man, these guys really came pretty well prepared. There are also some civilians here, so watch your fire. You don't fail the mission for collateral damage, but the radio lady does shout at you, and we don't want to disappoint her. This transition from runway to harbor is also the only essential checkpoint in the game. It's almost like 2 levels running as one. I also love how you can see the glass tunnels underwater with some giant lizard people walking through them. The world existing outside of your actions is one of the most impactful world-building touches. Further in, and the destructible scenery team take a seat while the platforming and level layout team stand up and flex on them pretty hard. Lifts, moving platforms, a snaking critical path which takes you over and around and on conveyor belts through the level to these giant stealth bombers, and then over the bombers through the gaps in the wall, and then some hazards, specifically the flames shooting from the bombers as you run along conveyors. I love stacking mechanics. You even need to jump from belt to belt while moving and avoiding blockages, and when you're out, even the radio lady appreciates your skill.
Terrific. Hope you're hungry. We're closing in on the Tower Restaurant.
You think that you have foiled my plans? You'll regret such insolence.
I heard they serve decent food here once. Pricey, but good. Congrats on getting out of the conveyor zone. Looks like a storage facility. Anything we can use here?
This leads to the LAX boss battle, a spinning disc armed to the teeth. The boss hovers in a square path around this central small building, which you can use as cover, and even need to blow the corners off to reveal some rearming stations. The disc has a freeze ray, which will stun you for a few seconds, letting the ads throw some damage onto you, but that's more of a nuisance and less of an actual dangerous ability. Taking down the disc means blowing up the 4 nodes attached to it and then just showering it with damage, eventually making it crash back down to the ground. And with the spaceport cleared, we're on to the final level, Long Beach.
Central to X1 Alpha, Vladimir Leach, CEO of Macrobus, is suspected of tampering with the city's computer files. In a matter of hours, the economy of the entire region will be in total chaos. LAPD units on the scene are not responding. We're sending you to Macrobus. Be advised, there's a rumor about a supercomputer that's smarter than God. Leach's personal creation. If it exists, it'll be deep in the heart of the compound. Bring in Leach. Something here smells bad. I don't make this crew of brainiacs for serious criminals. You have the green light to use deadly force.
New weapon, the electric gun. Mid-range, rapid-fire, auto-lock-on lightning gun. The beach level is strange. You breach the guarded complex from the water, but everyone's already dead, and then your radio frequency is hijacked.
LAPD response time predictably inadequate. I am in complete control here.
Seems whatever is in charge here has a thing against the living. We push on into this trap, a pit with steps and ramps up each side filled with toxic barrels and an endless flood of small carrying robots bringing more barrels. You need to destroy all the toxic barrels before the lockdown gates open. There's no real danger here, it's just time consuming. And then we discover the owner and operator of this installation, the Good Doctor, isn't looking too healthy or human anymore. Seems he's had the skin flayed from his body and has been hardwired into this AI PC supercomputer. So we solve his pain problem through the liberal application of firepower, but the troubles aren't over. That was not the computer's brain. It seems like the whole facility is now controlled by a rogue AI, so we need to break through the puzzle locks to reach the core. This final level is interesting. It's more of a formulaic puzzle layout with very little backtracking, very few wrong turns. It's more of a linear journey from puzzle to puzzle, each with a specific solution that if you don't find in time, you die. Like these missile-launching laser satellites. You need to blow up the satellite controls, each housed within a framework before the satellites themselves shoot you. But you can only blow up the framework from a very specific vantage point. Keep moving or you'll die. After the satellite stations, you access the road, a more open section with an electrified road leading to the final boss, and each small puzzle is now about turning off a section of the road's defenses, leading to another puzzle to turn off the next section. Like destroying these 4 Tesla bolt generators, making sure to hide from the homing electrical missiles they fire back because they really hurt. In fact, I think this is the first time you need to actively lure enemy projectiles into scenery and not just tank the damage, because they will kill you. And then there's an open cyborg training area where you cut down swarms of half-human, half-robot hybrids. And this little puzzle needing you to time your jump onto a moving crane to shut it down from the central cab. And then you're told to deal with some maintenance bugs, and the designers took that literally, leading to an actual mini-boss fight against a swarm of bugs and a brood mother in one of the walls, which is also the only time you hear the radio lady swear.
You are exceeding the statistical norm for combat efficiency.
You've got to get to the Queen and take her down.
Your statistical probability for survival is 0.0005.
Maybe you should use bug spray. Take that, you bug-eyed bitch.
Perhaps you do not understand math.
This opens up the final area, but just before, you'll see there's a sunken ship in the distance, the Queen Mary, and if you drop down into the water and press this button, for some random reason, you'll get a little tourist info dump about it.
This is the site of the former Queen Mary. The Queen foundered during the Cataclysm. The majestic ship now sleeps beneath the waves in Long Beach Harbor. Only the stacks are visible at low tide. A moment of silence, please. All right, move along, please.
Final puzzle. Destroy 3 generators to raise 3 platforms up and then jump from platform to platform to access the inner core of this rogue AI supercomputer network, drop into the lair itself and take on the 3 cores one at a time, each one becoming vulnerable for a few seconds and spawning more enemies as they do. The challenge here is when the heads spawn enemies, your targeting laser gets pulled away from the console you need to shoot, meaning you've got to get up close and personal with each core to guarantee your missiles hit. Take down 3 cores and the final boss goes down, and then you have finished Future Cop's single-player campaign. You get to watch the credits. What kind of music do you think's going to play over the credits? Maybe rock, techno, cyberpunk? No. When you finish the game, you get this.
You did a fine day's work. Get some sleep, because we gotta do it all again tomorrow.
I was lost for words when this started playing. I have no idea why it's here. So with the main game down, there's only one more game mode left. Precinct Assault. And it may seem like a simple afterthought, but this small throwaway game mode is probably the best thing about Future Cop. And it's criminal that this game isn't appreciated for its more obvious contribution to gaming history, pun not intended. Precinct Assault is a 1 or 2 player competitive mode. If you play 1 player, you play against Sky Captain, a flying AI-powered ship with some great voice acting. In this mode, one of you starts in the red base and the other starts in the blue base, and you can spend the points that you earn to spawn in tanks and flying drones. The drones stay near your base as defenders. The tanks, much like creeps, slowly make their way to the other base, and when a tank reaches the other base, you win. Destroying the enemy's tanks and drones gains you points, and you can also capture turrets around the map simply by running up to them and standing there. If you destroy an enemy captured turret, it will respawn neutral, ready to be captured again. So, 2 bases, pre-game setup, central battlefield, towers, specific lanes of attack, points for killing enemy minions, points spent on yours. This is basically the foundation for the modern MOBA. But Future Cop had 5 different maps. Honestly, the Precinct Assault mode is fantastic. It's taken the best bits from all the levels and combined them. Open spaces leading to tight corridors, ramps, steps, power-ups, hazards, great view lines in the foreground. It's just super fun. Playing against a mate, these games can last for ages, and playing against Sky Captain is great fun because every time you kill Sky Captain, he respawns stronger, and every time you completely win a match, the game tracks that victory, and when you try again, he starts stronger. So there's a progressive overload of in-game difficulty. And man, the voice acting for Sky Captain is memorable and imposing.
Death from above. I live again.
Base turret destroyed. Enemy within blue base perimeter.
Go forth, my minions. Beginner's luck. Try to take me this time. Defend your master.
Red dreadnought activated.
You are mine.
So the next time someone asks you what the first MOBA game was, it wasn't Warcraft 3 defense maps, it wasn't even the StarCraft creep defense and base assault mods. Distilled down to its most recognizable design aspects, the first MOBA game was Future Cop LAPD. And now we've finished the whole game and spent some time taking down Sky Captain, we can finally answer the question, was it any good? Future Cop is a short but intense game, clocking in at about 5 hours for the main campaign if you're being cautious, but boasting endless hours of 2-player fun in Precinct Assault. The main game itself is self-aware enough to be fun, but serious enough to be challenging. The world building is unfortunately never more than background detail enhancing the moment-to-moment gameplay, which is for itself absolutely fantastic. The 2 modes of the X1 Alpha vehicle feel different enough to justify them both existing. The visuals and audio combine fantastically during combat, and the soundtrack keeps the whole thing exciting. New mechanics are sparse, but never overstay their welcome, but it can feel there are aspects which could have been developed further. Teleports only existing for a single level is a shame, or multiple level paths requiring different weapon loadouts could have given the game some added replayability. Future Cop is the perfect game for a remake because there is so much unrealized potential here that was probably limited by the PlayStation 1 hardware at the time. But most of this is forgiven when you take into account the entire campaign and Precinct Assault mode is 2-player, making Future Cop LAPD one of the best couch co-op PlayStation 1 games for some intense teamwork or competitive team battling. Future Cop was, as its name suggests, ahead of its time, and it absolutely still holds up today. So to end the review, I will award Future Cop LAPD
Deadly force authorized.
Cheers for watching. Another massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon, Twitch, and YouTube who keep the channel alive. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and our Discord. And as always, remember,
Get some sleep, because we gotta do it all again